Hey, Stick Figure Historian here, and we're jumping into another episode of the American series. Now, our last episode was a pretty sad one, but we'll turn to happier things now. Not puppy dogs and rainbows exactly, but no more massacres or anything that downer. In the spring of 1637, Roger Williams was at last reunited with his wife and daughters. At first, he was only able to support them using the money he got from selling off their house back in Salem. But once his trading post was established, they were able to live quite comfortably. He had set up this post in the busy port of Narragansett Bay, which you can see on the map of Rhode Island here. It's marked in blue, with a little arrow pointing towards the bay. Not too far away from Providence. Which reminds me, I had someone in the comments a while back ask if Providence was in Rhode Island, and I thought I should explain what's going on with that. So yes, Roger Williams is known as the founder of the colony of Rhode Island. It started out just as Providence and this little island here, but eventually grew to include the whole area it is today. Which leaves the question, why the name Rhode Island? Well, it all has to do with that little island I have circled. Aquidneck Island. But actually, it used to be called Rhode Island. And there's a couple theories for this. The first is that back in 1524, an Italian explorer named Giovanni da Verrazzano landed there. And I guess it reminded him of the Isle of Rhodes back in Greece for some reason. So he called it Rhode Island. Funny thing is, nobody's actually sure if Aquidneck is actually the island he landed on, or if it was a different one. He didn't exactly keep very good charts, so we can't know for certain. Second theory is that a Dutch explorer by the name of Adrian Block was sailing around the area in the 1600s, and he landed on the island. He called it Inrodelijk Eilandi. Sorry, my best attempt at Dutch. In English, it means a reddish island. And since the Dutch word for red is rude, it was logically anglicized as Rhode Island. As to why Block decided to call it red, speculation is that maybe it had something to do with the red-colored foliage or red clay that he saw. I'm honestly kind of skeptical. Anyway, those are the theories. The first documentation of the island being called Rhode Island is by Roger Williams. And when he got a charter for his colony from England, yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but don't worry, I'll cover that too. The whole name of the colony was Rhode Island and Providence Plantations. And actually, I recently learned the name continued on when it became a state too, up until November 2020, when it was voted out in a state constitutional amendment. Not sure why they wanted to change it after so long, but oh well. But back to what I was originally saying. Roger Williams had set up his trading post in the busy port of Narragansett Bay, a personal gift to him from Copernicus, mainly for trading with the Indians. He sold cloth, seeds, cooking utensils, and tools, among other useful things to his customers. But he didn't sell guns or ammunition, since he didn't want to encourage or aid war between the tribes and the settlers. Nor did he sell any alcohol unless it was to be used as a medicine. This year further enlivened the Williams household with the birth of yet another daughter. She was aptly named Providence, just as the settlement was called, in gratefulness to the God that provides for the needs of the oppressed. And truly, oppression was still rife in the realm of their northern neighbors. People continued to suffer under the ultra-Calvinist regime of Massachusetts Bay. One such example that stands out to us about this time is a brave woman by the name of Anne Hutchinson. Anne started out as a nobody, and probably would have stayed one of those unknown characters in history forever, had she not decided to think and speak for herself in a world where it was unacceptable to do so. Born to a Puritan preacher back in England, Anne grew up like most other English girls, married and began to rear a family, and a rather large family she raised at that, even for the times. Anne had 15 children in all, only one of which did not survive to adulthood. Now, remember that preacher dude, John Cotton, who rode with Roger Williams to the meeting in Sempringham way back? Well, he happened to begin preaching at a church near Anne's home one day, and she and her husband went to hear him speak. They were astounded. "You do not need good works to be saved," Cotton proclaimed. "God saves us by His free grace. Nothing we do can earn this." This was very different from what many of the other Puritan preachers were saying. They thought that a person must act holy and do pious things like read the Bible, listen to sermons, or pray to try to get God to give them His grace. Cotton said this was wrong. And furthermore, he said that once the Holy Spirit came to dwell within a man, it was the Spirit that helped him live the holy life, not the man himself. Another very striking idea, as most Puritans didn't actually believe the Holy Spirit came to live within a Christian's heart. Cotton's teaching was particularly striking to Anne, who had never heard the likes of this before. These truths were like a breath of fresh air to her soul, and she came at once to adore this preacher. The Hutchinsons attended Cotton's church for many years, until they followed him in his eventual flight to Massachusetts. Anne's large family settled down quite comfortably in Boston, where Cotton obtained a fill-in position as pastor of the First Boston Church, since the original pastor, John Wilson, had gone back to England temporarily. Anne's house was actually the largest in town for quite some time. She was a big help to the women in the growing community by constantly offering her services as a midwife. While Anne tended to these women, she often discussed sermons from the local churches with them. She explained how the preachers were teaching a gospel of salvation by works, and shared the doctrine of God's free grace and the indwelling gift of the Holy Spirit with them instead. So much did these women love to hear about these things, that Anne soon began to host meetings within her home on a regular basis to talk further with them. I guess these meetings were similar to what we might call today a women's Bible study. Anne's popularity continued to grow. Soon even men began attending the meetings at her house. Some of them were simply husbands of the women who had come before, but there were others as well. The young Sir Henry Vane was a notable example, he being the eldest son of a member of Parliament. But word began to get out to the general court about what Anne was teaching, and they were not happy. They condemned her meetings and ordered her to stop. But Anne wasn't the kind to bow and tremble at the dragon-fire breath of tyrants. "Does not the book of Titus tell us that the older women should teach the younger?" she retorted. The meetings didn't stop. There's much more to the story of this valiant woman, but I'll pause here, because this video is going to go on forever.